I was born and brewed in a village pub. Beer is part of my DNA, and I can prove it. Even my blood type is ABV, which is positive. My dad bought our pub in 1969. It was the summer of love, and he loved pubs. People always say to me, James, will you ever take over the family pub? Well, the answer is no, because the key thing about working behind a bar is eye contact and making connection. And I have got a lazy eye. Can you see that, sir? I'm talking to you. Imagine getting served by me. You wouldn't know where to look, would you? The other night, I was in a late bar. Bloke comes up to me and goes, "Here, mate, you looking at my missus? Hey, you looking at my missus?" I took my glasses off slowly. I said, "What do you think?" He goes, "To be honest, mate, I'm not sure." He's so embarrassed, he bought me a pint. Winner. The pub, ladies and gentlemen, is the gateway to the community. Now, my parents' pub has got two entrances. It's got the normal entrance, the lounge bar, all you lovely people who go. Side entrance, locals bar, right? People who rarely left the village. And in order to be a local, you need to get a nickname. Everyone's got a nickname. There's a lovely bloke, for example, called Jeff the Dog, because 21 years ago, he walked in with a dog. That's it. There's another bloke called Karate Jim, because he was thinking about doing karate. Never done it, thought about it. I've got a nickname, of course I've got a nickname. They call me Mortgage Eyes. One standard, one variable. And no interest from the ladies. Now, I've been a comedian for 25 years. I've recently also become a beer writer and a beer producer. But in the 25 years of becoming a comedian, I've realised it's quite a lonely job, and I wanted to connect more with people. The amount of times I've walked out on stage and the first people I've spoken to all day are the audience. So, hello. Hello. It's an amazing feeling, and oftentimes one of my favourite things is decompress after the show, have a beer, trade stories with fellow comedians. Whenever I meet somebody for the first time, a comedian, they often say, "Excuse me, is the Maidstone story actually true?" This is my most embarrassing moment as a comedian. 25 years ago, last week, I was booked to do a gig at a pub in Maidstone. Now, I don't know if you know Maidstone in Kent. The estate agent might describe it to you as vibrant. I think she made a typo. She meant to say violent. It's, if Kent is the Garden of Eden, then Maidstone is the compost heap. It was known as a violent gig, full of heckles. It was a bear pit. And I arrived, and I was already nervous because the previous week I'd got booed on at the Belfast Empire. So I was nervous, and I arrived, and I walked in to the pub. I'll never forget this. And it was like a scene from a Guy Ritchie movie, right? Geezers in polo shirts, guzzling lager. And I don't know if anybody's ever walked into a pub and thought, "Oh dear, this isn't quite for me." Whatever you do, don't say it out loud in Maidstone. They don't like it. I was nervous. I checked in at the bar, and as I was about to check in, one bloke turned to another and go, "Comedian arrived yet?" "Hopefully not. They're usually shit." I was like, I don't need this. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was nervous. Maybe it was my last gig. But I walked back into the car park, got in my car, phoned up the pub and said I'd had a breakdown. I think he thought emotional, but I was talking about the car. And he kept me on the phone for a couple of minutes, and all of a sudden, there was a tap on the side window. I look round, it's the landlord on a cordless phone. And we're looking at each other through the glass. He goes, "All right, mate, do you want to unwind the window, or do you want to keep talking on the phone?" He said, "Don't worry, son. Some of the best in the business have tried to get away from my gig." He goes, "Cognito, didn't fancy it. Jerry Sadowitz, he bottled it. Russell Brand, he was up for it, but I think he was on heroin at the time. Come on, son, get out, and we'll get you a pint, and we'll get you started." 20 minutes later, true to his word, he pulled the plug out of the fruit machine and announced me with, "Right, this next one tried to do a runner. Please welcome James Dowdeswell." I walk onto the stage. I say stage, it was a crate. with a plank of wood on the top. I stood there and I did a couple of jokes. And I started to realize, hang on, I've misjudged this audience. This isn't a rough crowd. This is just like the locals bar. And I tried to pretend, this is Jeff the dog. This is Karate Jim. And I relaxed into it. It went fine. After the show, I became part of the community. People started buying me beers. In fact, so much so, I ended up staying the night at the pub because I couldn't drive home. And me and the landlord, we're now friends on Facebook. True. I'd misjudged it. And sometimes we look at a situation, we think, right, well, that looks like a rough community, peel it away, salt of the earth. What's the number one thing, ladies and gentlemen, we missed during the lockdown, apart from seeing family and friends? The pub. When we house hunt, what's the number one thing we look for? Good local pub, exactly. Why did I apply to TEDxTamworth when I live in southeast London? Simple, good local pub. You've got twice crowned Pub of the Year right here in Tamworth. And I know a little thing about Perfect Pub. I wrote a book about the Perfect Pub. It was inspired by George Orwell, who wrote an amazing essay in the London Evening Standard in 1946, where he imagined his perfect pub and he called it the Moon Underwater. It's influenced a few pubs today. And in it, he described the unique atmosphere of an English pub. But I think more than atmosphere, it's community that's the lifeblood of the pub. The word public house, it means public house. Pub is short for public house. It means for everybody, regardless of age, creed, wherever you're from, however you identify, everybody is welcome. When I was in my 20s, my best drinking partner was a guy called Cyril, and he was in his early 70s, right? Cyril was an ex-RAF pilot, ex-First Division football referee with a wealth of stories, including run-ins with Dennis Law and Georgie Best. I loved Cyril. He had a great attitude. For example, his glass was always half full, unless it's somebody else's round. He fell on hard times, so he actually rented a little cottage in the village, and the landlord was notoriously tight. For example, one day he said to Cyril, you can park your bike in the shed, and then the following week charge him £3 rent. We were outraged in the pub, £3 rent. So we talked up the amount he'd pay for the week, £73, and then 73 of us wrote cheques for £1 each to the landlord. He was too embarrassed to check them, so Cyril ended up parking his bike for free. Result, power to the pub people. The pint is mightier than the sword, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I love beer. We laugh, we cry, we celebrate, we commiserate all over a beer. It's a universal drink, isn't it? It's the third most popular drink in the world after water and tea. According to archaeologists, it was first discovered in 8000 BC by the Sumerians in Mesopotamia. Now, the Sumerians loved beer so much, they kick-started the Neolithic Revolution, which is a fancy word of saying we moved from hunter-gatherers to farmers. And why did we become farmers? We wanted to farm wheat, to make beer, and we created settlements to drink beer with our mates. So you could say beer is the ultimate social glue. Beer is shared by everybody, isn't it? It's shared by everybody. You don't just go and get your own drink. We buy a round of drinks. And we've always done that. In the Middle Ages, they didn't have glasses. They had communal bowls. And you mark your level by putting a peg. And if you took more than your fair share, it was known as taking someone down a peg or two. Ah. Now, the pub business has changed a lot, as you might have realised. In the last 30 years, it's changed immeasurably. Now, some of you over here are over the age of 40 and might remember the punk rock song, 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps. I'll have 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps, please. Nowadays, that's true craft ales, gluten-free crisps, and the Wi-Fi code, please. And that's just my order at the pub. Craft beer. It's everywhere. I don't know if anybody enjoys a craft beer, but it's everywhere. And do you know how the craft beer started in the UK? It was New Labour, ladies and gentlemen, New Labour. In 2002, it was Gordon Brown, my lazy-eyed brother from another mother. He launched a progressive beer tax to give financial things to small brewers. And if he'd have known he'd given birth to Brewdog, he'd have choked on his San Pellegrino, right? He doesn't actually drink himself, Gordon Brown. Cask beer is everywhere. But what is cask beer? I define it personally as a small artisanal product, right? It's in music terms, it's like an indie band compared to the mainstream. There's a huge thing in the craft beer moment now called collabs, where you collaborate with another brewery. That's what I've done. I've collaborated with another brewery. In fact, to be brutally honest, after a year and a half of trying, I finally collaborated with another brewery and I gave birth to my very own beer. Yeah. Thank you very much. 4.8% in alcohol, beer and brewer, very, very happy. And I have to say, selling beer has reminded me how important the community is, because that's who you sell it to. You sell it to your community. Everybody who's bought my beer knows me and or is connected to me in some way. It's so, so powerful. You know those big breweries you see, and they sort of lose their way. They've just lost their connection. They've lost their community. Beer is becoming more and more popular, despite what you read on social media. Everyone says young people don't drink beer. They do. Hipsters love cask beer. They love a pint of mild. And if you really don't think young people like beer, Gen Z love beer. I mean, for example, Guinness shortage recently. That's because Gen Z was splitting the G on TikTok. Alcohol-free beer is a huge thing now. And it's become more inclusive. You can have an alcohol-free beer, you can have a lower alcohol beer, you can have a gluten-free beer. In fact, a lot of my friends now drink alcohol-free beer. When I go out with them, I'm now the designated drinker. It's all changed. I mean, back in Victorian times, they were pushing temperance movement. They were pushing it. I mean, the Football League was started in 1888 by the temperance movement as a way of keeping people out of the pub on a Saturday afternoon. That backfired, didn't it? But buying a round is a social thing. It's a lovely thing. And I don't know about you, I've had deeper conversations over a beer than I have had over a cup of tea. I have a stand-up show I do called Beers of a Clown, and I go to breweries. And I've had more connection out of that than anything I've done in the last 25 years. Last September, I did a gig at Morehouse's Brewery in Burnley in conjunction with a group called Powered by Mates, which is a mental health charity, not a condom enthusiast group. And they were lovely lads, right? We had a wonderful time. We laughed, we cried, and we championed good mental health. And they produced a beer called Ask Twice. Now, you might have heard of this sentiment. If you're not sure how a friend's doing, ask them once. If you're really not sure, at the end of the conversation, ask twice. It's a wonderful thing. I use it myself. In fact, I used it last Saturday. Green King Brewery have just brought out a thing called Side Talk. Apparently 52% of men find it a lot easier to talk shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face. Although, not showing off with my eyes, I can do either. But it's a real thing. Talking at the bar, shoulder to shoulder with your mates. Ex-rugby player, Greg Bateman. He was suffering with his mental health. He found trips to the pub, having pints with friends, saved him. He allowed him to unburden himself. He has a beer called People's Captain, and he gives away a portion of that to charity. But pubs themselves, they don't just serve alcohol, they serve connection, and they serve society. Last year, pubs, according to Pub Aid, raised 100 million for charity, and another 40 million for grassroots sport. But what about pubs themselves? We're losing pubs. We're losing 6 pubs a week in this country. How many of you have walked down the high street and thought, oh, what a fancy block of flats? Didn't there used to be a pub there? Yes, there did, but it's shut down. So if you've got a local pub, use it, because otherwise they will vanish. They need your support. You look on social media, and the modern media often blames alcohol for the problems in society. Yet in my experience, drinking beer, both mindfully and moderately, helps bring people together. A pub is a safe space, for me anyway, where you can laugh, cry, celebrate and commiserate. Bartenders don't just serve beer, they lend an ear. It's not therapy, but it is therapeutic. So support your local pub, support your local brewery, try a beer you've never heard before. Experiment with alcohol-free beer. Talk to a stranger at the end of the bar. You never know, you might just meet your Cyril. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to end by proposing a toast. Here's to the nights we'll always remember, with the friends we'll never forget, and the beer that brought us here together. Cheers.